I'm back, baby. The FCC didn't ban me after episode 1, so I guess that means we get to keep on doing this. Thanks so much for tuning in to The Highway. This week we have Mr. Matt Bayles, record producer extraordinaire. He's produced records from bands like Botch, Isis, Mastodon, even The Sword. We had a great conversation this week. If you like what you hear on The Highway, go ahead and follow where you can follow, subscribe where you can subscribe, and if you want to go a little bit above and beyond and help support us, you can find us on Patreon at The Highway with Kyle Shutt. Shout out to Bob Bechtal, Mike Young, Bob Mavity, our only 3 patrons. I love you 3 guys so much. I'm going to shout you out on every episode. Just try and stop me. Be sure to sign up for that Patreon if you want early access to next week's episode, which is up right now. This podcast is still in the grassroots phase, and that means there's no ads to listen to and no sponsors to hear from. And tell you the truth, I like that just fine, because that means I get to do things my way.
The Highway.
Hey, what's up, buddy?
Hey, man. How you living?
I am living okay. I'm in beautiful, what used to be known as Austin, Texas.
What do you refer to it as now?
It's not
Seattle South?
It's not the same. Seattle South, New Austin, I like to call it. Yeah, it is a different landscape for sure. But everybody, welcome Matt Bayles to the show, producer extraordinaire. One of my favorite audio engineers. He's certainly unique in that respect. And yeah, I just kind of wanted to pick your brain about different things. With this podcast, I like to talk to every aspect of the music industry, from people that work at labels or touring musicians, or and you're the first one up from the audio engineering world in a segment that I like to call The Studio. But yeah, for people that don't know, Matt Bayles produced The Sword's third album, Warp Riders. He was the first actual producer that we worked with that we spent a significant amount of money on, relative to us at the time, in 2010. Well, and
it's a fortune in today's world.
Yeah, I mean, my goodness. I don't even want to talk about the current state of things, but back when music mattered.
I'm sure we'll circle around to it at some moment.
But I guess just go ahead and tell people a little bit about yourself and your background. And I know you came from the hardcore scene and ended up in Seattle, but that was way back in the 90s, and I'm sure people would love to hear about the climate back then.
Gosh, okay, well, I mean, I started out in music as a late 80s Connecticut straight edge kid. I put out a record that I didn't record. I had no recording expertise at that point, but I formed a label and released a record in 89. And, you know, music was just important to me from a very young age. I didn't start learning an instrument until I was 16, so I was kind of late to that, and it's not really my optimal skill set or whatever. But, you know, and then I lived in DC for a couple years for college, and then moved to Tennessee when I wanted to get into recording. And when I was in Tennessee, I fell in with the kids that would become His Hero Is Gone and Tragedy and that whole crew, the crusty punk scene that I was sort of associated with there. And then I finished school and moved to Seattle and got an internship at what at the time was Bad Animals, and, you know, was getting food for the post-production rooms and wishing I was in the music rooms because they had 3 of each. And post was just voiceovers for ads in the music rooms at the time. I mean, when I got there, I think within a couple weeks, Deftones came in to do Adrenaline.
Dang.
Pearl Jam came in to do Mirror Ball with Neil Young. So that was Brendan O'Brien and Terry Date, 2, you know, Godhead producers. You know, I spent a few months there being uppity and obnoxious and, you know, East Coast, and sort of forced my way into circumstances. And, you know, I was a runner on the Tripod Alice in Chains record for a few months, which just meant getting food and alcohol and hanging out and waiting for somebody to tell me to go get something. And then Ed Brooks, who was an engineer at the time and now does mastering, I had assisted him a little bit, and he got hired to go to Studio Litho, which is Stone from Pearl Jam studio. And he needed an assistant because at the time the studio was a finished space but had no console, had a tape machine and 2 racks of outboard gear, and we needed to record Neil Young and Pearl Jam rehearsals, excuse me, and record a song for a compilation. And you know, I'd wired studios before, and Ed knew that I wouldn't screw it up, and so he hired me to assist, and we ran mic cables into the tape machine from on the floor. I mean, and we had to do another vocal track. I had to go behind the tape machine and move it over because the console hadn't arrived yet, and that
got
crazy.
Me out of the. Oh my goodness.
Oh yeah, I mean we had a Mackie mixer, and we had rented an E BCM 10, which is a fancy 10-channel vintage sidecar. So we had a lot of great front end, but the mixing was done on a Mackie 32x8. And then so I became sort of the house engineer at Litho, assistant, whatever. And I'd wired studios, like I said, so I was responsible for finishing a lot of the wiring, audio wiring, and was the assistant there for a few years. And so that enabled me to work with Terry at Date on Around the Fur, and Brendan on No Code and Yield, Chad Blake on Binaural. As far as me assisting and watching these, really substantial, established, successful producers do their thing. So I got to really sponge up a lot of stuff, and during downtime I was doing local bands. So that was, Blood Brothers and Botch and all these bands that sort of helped me cut my teeth on actually running the show.
Was that in the same spot? Did you do all those local bands in the same space?
Yeah, I did that. I did those at Litho. Recording at least. Mixing, I tended to go, I think, at that point to Avast, which, if I recall. But, I'd have to go to check the credits on some of these. I probably did mix some of them at Litho. Litho, in September of that year, their API showed up, and it was a modded, custom. It was a vintage one that had been updated. So it was a beautiful sounding console, but, I grew up with automation when I was in college, so I wanted to, and this was all recorded to tape. This is 1995. Well, late 90s. Pro Tools wasn't ubiquitous at that point. So, tape. And so automation helped you do stuff that you might need to do that you couldn't pull off the way you do these days with DAWs. So, but most of it was tracked at Litho. It was a big 25-foot ceiling room. It had a nice live sound to it. It's been kind of renovated, and it's a little deader now, which at times bums me out, but it's still a great sounding room and amazing gear. But I wish the room was a little splashier the way it was when we first started. But yeah, so, and I fell in with the Seattle hardcore scene pretty soon after arriving. I went to a show March 2nd of 1995. That was Sick of It All, Orange 9mm, Korn playing second.
Damn.
And a band called Headline, which was a local straight edge band or whatever, and I
They're called Headline.
Yeah, they were. And then I think that was the name. I didn't know. I became friends with them, but at the time I didn't know who they were.
Yeah.
And I met a lot of people who became really close friends of mine. The guys from Undertow, the guys who would go on to be in, Ryan Fredrickson, who was in These Arms Are Snakes, and now in Dustmoth. I made a lot of friends there, and that falling into that, the local Northwest hardcore scene helped me find projects to do, to record.
That's awesome, man. Yeah, I first found out about you from Celestial, the Isis record.
Sure.
Which I thought was it stood out, heads and tails above anything else that was out at the time, musically and production-wise. It was, was that your first, I guess, kind of post-Botch? Because I remember Botch, but I didn't necessarily associate you with that record at the time.
Sure.
Was it Botch, do you think, that kind of got your foot in the door with all those other kind of hardcore bands that eventually led down that path? Botch was on Hydra Head, and I without that cross country association, I'm not. I don't become known to the Northeast metal, hardcore, whatever you want to call it, scene. The Botch record, Romans. Nervoso started it, but that was kind of the band finding their footing as they grew musically, and also me finding my footing as an engineer. That record was recorded. Nervoso was recorded in 3 days, I think. Damn.
Me.
All the great ones were. All your favorite albums out there, were recorded with the crappiest gear and on a shoestring budget and a total time crunch. That's what I love about most debut records.
Yeah, and then we did Romans, and Romans I think we spent about 2 weeks on. But Romans just kind of they really did something special, and I had gotten better and was able to capture it and not sort of I don't know. I was able to step up to their where they had set the bar musically or whatever. So, but yeah, so Romans really started it. Romans got me Celestial. Romans and Celestial got me, Burned by the Sun and Mastodon. So yeah, I mean, that's kind of the arc, but it all, yeah, I mean, the point A is We Are the Romans by Botch for sure.
That's awesome, man. And another question I wanted to ask you was going to audio engineering school.
Mm-hmm.
What, just because I'm curious, because I never went to any sort of formal educational establishment.
Sure.
What do you, not so much what do you learn, but what do you take away from a formal sound engineering education versus someone who becomes a home recording savant?
Well, I mean, there's, I'll speak specifically to what it offered me first. I mean, I don't think there's anything wrong with becoming a home recording savant.
I'm not saying
I mean, I think
negative
there's a lot of
whatever.
freedom there's a lot of freedom that comes from it. But for me, I was still, college for me was a chance to go make mistakes without consequence.
Totally.
And a lot of those mistakes are mistakes of slightly intense Northeast personality. And being an asshole and realizing I was an asshole, feeling bad about being an asshole, but not worrying about what somebody because I was outside Nashville. Like, I didn't care what Nashville thought of me. And I mean, Nashville's obviously a huge scene. Nobody knew who the hell I was. My point is, I needed to learn how to, be a little more diplomatic and be all these things. And it was a good place to learn, because if I blew it there, if I bummed somebody out, I knew it wasn't someplace I was going to stay.
Totally.
And there was different moments where, I mean, I got raked over the coals as an intern for some of the dumbest shit. But there was also times where I was, not, I mean, I wasn't inappropriate, but I was, less appropriate. So speaking specifically from, I needed time to mature. Like, I needed to grow up.
Mm-hmm.
And so college, finishing college for me was a chance to grow up more, mentally, as opposed to the rest of it. In terms of what I learned technologically, I mean, it gave me the means to learn. You get the foundations right. You can go into any room and you're like, oh, it's a split console, it's an inline console, and you can, you can know what the hell is happening because it's the same as some other brand, even if they use different words or different implementations. But again, when I learned, I mean, you're dealing with consoles and tape machines and nowadays, guys, people at home don't need to think about tape machine alignment or how hard they're hitting the tape, or, there's a lot of variables there, but there's actually far less, because you might have an outboard mic preamp, or your interface might have built-in mic preamps. And so you're not really, you learn how to learn new stuff basically.
Mm-hmm.
And learning how to align tape machines was something that they actually didn't even teach you in school, because they didn't want you to screw them up. But by going in there and doing them in the school studios, but there's a lot of depth to analog recording that maybe, at the risk of sounding like an old fart, isn't necessarily there technologically in DAW land.
No, totally. I 100% agree. Which is why the Sword, if we could, we tried to record as much to tape as possible. Sometimes we went full digital. It really didn't matter. There's no rules in recording. I think it's just a matter of what you have and making what you have sound as good as you possibly can. Would you say that recording to tape and that things like that are a dying art? Or is it kind of like vinyl, where it's like it's going to have a comeback or something like that, or
I mean, I think there's a like everything in the music industry these days, which we talked about briefly before we started recording, is finances. When I was starting, when I on No Code, Pearl Jam's No Code, we used like 100 reels of tape.
Good Lord.
And I was the assistant, so I was running the tape log, and I had to keep track of everything. And, that was $140 a reel. Now, that's 1996. The music industry had not collapsed, or the revenue streams of record sales had not collapsed. And that was $140 a reel. And, Romans, which was not made with a massive budget. I mean, we probably had to spend $900, $600, maybe $600 on tape, as a guess. I don't know, 4 reels, thinking of how long the record is.
Right.
You can buy a hard drive and put the whole record on it for $100 now. And tape is now over $300 a reel.
Yeesh.
And you've got to find a studio that has a tape machine that works.
Yeah, we used to buy used reels of tape, like that were made for like the Batman the Animated Series, like sound effects, stuff like that. Like you could just record over that, and you could get it for much cheaper than
as long as there's no edits.
Reel. Yeah, totally.
Yeah, as long as there's no edits. I mean, and that was a way to get around the what was even then somewhat expensive, but the price has doubled. You don't, the other thing in my experience is that people romanticize tape until they want you to fix something that they know you can fix in the digital realm. These are younger musicians generally speaking.
You can slice that tape, but that's a oof.
Oh, I mean, I love slicing tape. I'm talking about like move one kick drum or
totally.
Or tune this or I mean, I love razor blade editing. I mean, I grew up with it professionally speaking. Like,
right.
I love razor blade editing, and that's certainly something that a lot of people, when I do it, the occasions where I've done tape, even in the late 90s when I would do editing, the bands I was working with were like, "What are you doing? That's so scary." So yeah, I mean, yes, I think the issue really is that, the equipment and budgets just aren't there. I mean, again, the revenue isn't there, so budgets shrink, and that means that hard drives, and you can keep 10 takes, and you don't have to commit to a take.
Yeah.
Or risk erasing it. I mean, the post that I made today about Oceanic.
One of my favorite records too. I love that album.
We had a song. We had the tones reel. So if you have a tones reel, there's calibration tones you have to put on the one reel so that when you go studio to studio, you can calibrate the tape machine, 1K, 10K, whatever. Those tones take up 3 minutes of tape, 3.5 minutes of tape.
And on each tape, you only have like 18 minutes.
16 and a half. 16:40.
Yeah.
So that reel, there's 13 minutes left because there's a record pad, whatever. So I'm like, Aaron, they're like, okay, we're doing the song. It's kind of long. I'm like, okay, well, I got 13 minutes on this reel. Is that enough? And they're like, oh yeah, it's like 11. I'm like, okay. So we start tracking and, like some of their songs, I mean, there's middle sections that they sort of dynamically build, especially on that record, they understand where it's going, but they may not have a count for the repetitions.
Right.
And that version ran long, and it was amazing. And the tape ran out before they got to the end.
Oh.
And there's nothing, and I didn't have an extra in theory, I don't even think I had extra tape. So we could have gone and tried to do a certain section to the end and then edit it on to the other one, but I don't think we had the tape. And so we had to erase it. And that was, we had no choice. We had this X amount of tape and they ended up doing a great job, a great version. It's not, but we all remembered that one as being something unique because I think it had a more extended middle section that they customarily didn't do, and they were just feeling it.
Right.
But we couldn't keep it. We didn't have, I think it might have been the last song we recorded. It must have been because we didn't have extra tape available to keep the take and try and do an edit.
That happened to all kinds of bands.
We would have if we tried. If we didn't do it, we must not have had the tape.
Even bands like Van Halen, I remember that the story that I heard was when they were recording Jump, the reason the fade out happened so fast at the end is because they literally ran out of tape like right at the last hit, and they didn't capture like the last hit or something, so they had to just do a super fast fade out.
Now I'm sorry, that strikes me as absurd.
I don't know.
Those motherfuckers had all the money in the world. Those idiots couldn't have planned bought another reel and that's absurd. I can't believe that Van Halen had to go through that kind of nonsense, but whatever.
Oh man. Well, that's awesome hearing your point of view on that. I guess I also wanted to know, because maybe some people don't know that you did play keyboards along with engineering, minus the Bear. And you did the first 3 albums, is that right? Or 4?
Well, I mean, I was involved. I was in the band through Mano Celosa, so it was EP full length as a band member.
Oh, okay. But you produced it as well, right?
I did not record. I didn't record Pirates. I didn't want to.
Okay.
So the first full length, I didn't have a hand in the recording or the mixing. I suggested Steve Fisk, who was an engineer from around here who'd worked with Unwound and was just kind of is a Northwest legend. And I just thought everybody in the band had recorded with me in Kill Sadie and Botch and Sharks Keep Moving. I was like, and I was like, I honestly am sick of coaching you guys. I mean, that's kind of me being a wise ass, but I was like, we should do something with somebody else so that you guys can work with somebody else and have a different vibe.
That's cool because it's not necessarily like anomalous for a producer to also be in a band, but I will say that it doesn't happen all that often where you get a real deal big name record producer that also has experience hopping in a van and driving around the world and playing music for a living without that added sort of just weight of being the producer. And I just wanted to pick your brain about the differences in those two and like how you liked one versus the other or whatever.
Well, I mean, so I went from high school straight to college to my internship into my career. I didn't really fuck around. Like I keep going back to my Northeast roots, but there's just a certain expectation of like my parents were driving me and they didn't understand my career choice on a lot of levels. And so I sort of felt as though I had to make something go and establish it and my dad's a computer guy basically. And so they were just like, can you make money at that? I was like, yeah, I'm going to go do it. I'm going to prove it to you and whatever, so I kind of had this push to try and get somewhere. And I mean, I still have it, but I mean, at that moment I was trying to prove it to myself and I didn't want to, I needed to get somewhere in my own brain. But Minus the Bear was kind of my gap years. They were, I joined the band at 29 and they were my chance to kick back a little bit, and be creative. I'm a decent musician. It's not my gift, but I'm a decent musician. I have a good ear and I can translate it to my fingers relatively well. But, the guys in the band were some of my closest friends. They were my drinking buddies, prior to the band starting. And it was a chance for me to live a little instead of just grind in the studio, and to, again, exercise my musical muscles as opposed to my engineering muscles, I guess. So yeah, I mean, it was a chance to see the world in a way that I was never anticipating. I wouldn't have thought I would have ended up in a band.
Yeah, did you ever want to be a musician? Yeah, did you ever want to travel the world and do that, like in a band, or did it just kind of happen?
I don't need to be on stage. I don't aspire to be on stage. I like being creative. I like the process of working with other people and trying ideas, and I mean, which is the job I've chosen is pretty good for that because I get new ideas every record. So no, it wasn't a goal, but again, I heard these demos from Dave and Aaron and Corey and I was like, oh, this is really good. And Jake, there was no vocals on it yet, but I was like, this is awesome. And Dave's guitar playing is kind of frenetic. And I was like, if I take my hack keyboard skills and play simple stuff underneath his craziness, it's going to be awesome. And so I just threw some keyboards on and they liked what they heard. And they were they were good friends of mine, but as far as my involvement in the band and, so it just worked out, and I'm super grateful for it. I mean, it also gave me the opportunity, and I thought about it in this way at the time, but it gave me the opportunity to break free of the hardcore scene a little bit, the metal scene, like creatively, be viewed as something other than the guy who did Botch and
totally
and the other.
That's awesome.
Because before I was a hardcore kid, I was a new wave kid. The Smiths and the Cure and all that. I mean, I'm all about it. And so, as much as I love the aggressive music scene and what it's meant to me throughout my life, it can get a little monotonous, just like anything can if you're just doing the same thing all the time. So,
totally.
Minus the Bear really afforded me the ability to spread my wings professionally, in the engineering side, because I'd meet new people and get opportunities to work with them that were not so narrowly into the extreme music scene.
Right. Did the allure of tour ever make you want to try your hand at live sound, like as a front of house engineer touring, or was touring just sort of like one of those things that you got sick of and wanted to stay home and do sound?
Yeah. I mean, I did a little bit. I mean, I did a little bit of live sound with Botch, just when I'd get in the van to get, like, sort of have a vacation, and I'd be like, if you want me to do sound, I'll do sound, and so I'd do it here and there. It's just never occurred to me. The studio's always been my realm.
Totally.
And I certainly, and if it didn't occur to me to do it before I joined the band, to go around on tour as a band member, it's kind of like going from band member to live sound guys. Lifestyle-wise, is a bit of a demotion.
Oh, you could say that totally.
and I'm not putting down live sound guys, but if you've been on tour and you've been on stage doing the thing, if it was the only option I had, of course I'd do it. Like I love doing audio, like it,
Yeah.
But it would, from from the standpoint of being on tour in a bus or wherever, or even in a van, and you know, just having that to look forward to, I don't know if that's enough of a hook for me to want to make that leap.
Totally understandable. Well, we'd be remiss if we didn't discuss Warp Riders at least a little bit.
Sure.
I know that being an audio engineer can kind of be like being a tattooer, where you don't remember every single tattoo you ever did just because there's no way to remember every detail about every single thing. But I'd be interested just to hear your take. I could talk about it all day, but what just from your point of view as an outsider, as probably the first outsider to work with the sword in a studio setting, at least. I just wanted to know what that was like, because we had just come off the tails of the Metallica's World Magnetic Tour. We played, 110 shows or something like that with them. The expectations were super high for the next Sword album. And our first two albums were done, were self-produced by JD and then engineered by Brian Ritchie. Yep. And that was definitely, you could argue that it was just in that hard uptick of our career, like the biggest records we had made for the least amount of money spent, and honestly the least amount of expertise exacted upon them.
Sure.
And which is crazy because we did this massive, worldwide arena tour on an album that we basically recorded ourselves. It all kind of went backwards, and I think just there were so many eyes on us and everything like that, and expectation is a musician's worst enemy. And so I just wanted to hear, kind of like what you thought about going into that project and what you thought about getting to meet us and everything.
I've lost you.
Oh, do you have me?
Okay, you're back.
Oh, I'm back? Oh, I'm sorry.
That's okay. I don't know what happened, but whether it was signal.
Shit happens. Well, basically, I was just asking about what your takes were on just walking into that situation, not having met us before, and what you thought about us.
I mean, obviously, when there's label, you guys probably had a lot more back conversations about sort of pressures and expectations, and whether it was management or label, or labels have a way of flexing their own sort of influence or whatever. But no, I mean, I feel like there's been a handful of times where I've been the first person, the first outside person to work with a band, and my approach is to come in and do my thing, but also respect the fact that this is a new experience for the people I'm working with, and I push, but I try to make sure that the band doesn't feel like I'm taking all agency or ownership away from, some people, the word producer, and I'm not saying this actually applies to you guys so much, but the word producer sometimes is become weighted in like we no longer have control sort of sense. And I don't like making people feel that way. I can be bossy, but it's not my way or the highway. It's just like, hey, play it better. Hey, we really need to consider this, and then let's make a decision. But you guys had songwriting wise had sort of shifted a little bit, into some slightly more classic rock tinges, ZZ Top tinges, or whatever you want to, associate that with. And I mean, that's what you brought to the table, and I loved it. And I was like, okay, let's lean into this. And the things I remember, I'm not entirely sure. Like, I remember just struggling with cymbals and snare drums.
Trivet he's an incredible drummer, absolutely phenomenal drummer, but he hit the drums harder than I think I've ever seen anybody hit the drums, except for Sam from Trash Talk. He hit the drums harder than Trivet, I think. But yeah,
he hits the cymbal. It's the thing. The thing for me is, and this is a universal recording thing. I mean, Trivet might be an example of when it was a challenge, a little more so. But drummers who hit their cymbals too hard, I mean, like he hit his cymbals harder than his drums. Trivet did from a recording standpoint. It was jazzy snare, metal cymbals, and the problem sometimes was trying to get that snare to pop when you're not really hitting it hard, and then the cymbals are bleeding everywhere and overwhelming everything. It's like he's got an amazing feel, but from a recording standpoint, there were some challenges there, and what I remember more than anything is during mixing, him feeling like he kept telling me to turn the snare up, and I kept doing it, but he kept thinking I wasn't or something. I don't know. Like there was moments where I just feel like he didn't think I was on his side. And unfortunately, that's the kind of stuff I really remember about that record. I mean, I remember, having a blast with Brian and you and JD was kind of quiet. That's his personality. But it was fun. I enjoyed it. I love the songs. I got to play some keyboards on it, which was fun, and I didn't hack too poorly.
Yeah, I watched you like paint in MIDI. That's the only way I could put it. I
played some real organ on that too, though.
You did, but I had never seen anybody bring up a MIDI grid and just literally like paint
drag things around.
It was really something. It's something that I've taken with me in my own MIDI programming as the years went on. One thing I did want to say was that the Sword, since we were so insular before and we were in charge of our own recordings, we would do 2, 3, 4 takes if we needed to and just get it right, get it to where we were happy and
right.
and felt that the recording represented what we were capable of. But recording with you was the first time that anyone had like drilled us, almost like an NBA coach or something like that, where you're like, okay, do it again. And again, I remember there was times when me and Trivet were looking at each other when you were like, we were on take 9 and you're like, okay, let's do a couple more. And they were like, is he serious?
Well, and that might have been the beginning of Trivet's frustration with me.
Well, he can get over it. But, it made for a phenomenal record. And it made me understand the importance of not falling in love with a take, and not being afraid to just keep going and past it and just push yourself more and more, because I really feel that when the Sword started, I wasn't necessarily playing any leads. There would be a couple here. I did like the double lead and Iron Swan, and I did a couple on Winter's Wolves or here and there or whatever, but I never really with Gods of the Earth I started to explore doing crazy solos a little bit more. I unfortunately came up in the 90s when playing guitar solos was not cool.
Oh, yeah.
And that really, honestly, didn't do me any favors. I kind of resent that about most grunge bands. But as after you go on tour with Metallica for a year, you want to play some ripping guitar solos. And I came home from that tour, and I just did a bunch of LSD all summer long, and just sat there and played guitar. And I was just like, I'm gonna get to the bottom of this shit, And that was the first time. Warp Riders was the first time I was like, okay, guys, I've got like 26 guitar solos for this album, and they're all a little different, this and that, and I just, that was a lot of fun running those with you, because you drilled me, man. You were in there, I was like, okay, do it again. No, you can do a little bit better. Like, you wouldn't let me get away with like editing little bends here and there. You're like, no, you can play it. Like, yeah.
I think there's probably, I don't remember, to me that's just kind of part of the process, so I don't remember. I remember there being a lot of solos, but I don't remember like a struggle within it, and so I'm sure there was probably some editing, but I don't remember how structured your solos were. But I'm one of the things that when I was watching like Brendan O'Brien work with Mike McCready doing guitar solos is Mike doesn't really play the same thing twice ever.
Yeah.
And so watching Brendan push and then be able to arrange things kind of after the fact in comping, which again wasn't necessarily what we were doing, but I've after doing it for so long, you kind of know where like the third set of, if there's a 16-bar solo, the third set of 4 is almost always where not the ideas run out, but the ideas hit a wall, and you've got to like find a way to get from, bar 8 to bar 13.
Totally.
And, because like that's, the ideas are great, and then there's like 4 bars of something that's almost there, and then there's the end.
I know, so, with a solo too, you can't peak too soon. You have to really like choose where the climax is going to be, and you have to understand like where it's going to come down, even if you're improvising or if you're structuring one.
Yeah, and that's how many notes you're playing. It's the notes you choose to let sustain. It's all those different things, and I grew up in. The first music. Well, there's the music my parents played for me as growing up, but then the first music I actually cared about in like 5th and 6th grade was like Rat and Twisted Sister, and that kind of stuff. And Rat had some actually pretty good lyrical solos, you know what I mean? And so it's like I learned in that sort of zone. Yep. Hair metal solos. Yeah, I'm older than you. And then, then you get into like the late 80s when Bon Jovi and stuff, again, like very lyrical solos. I
like how you say that, because like the best guitar solos in the world you can sing. I think that's what you're trying to convey.
Yeah, you can wheedle away, and there's something to be said for some moments of the wheedling, but if it's all just that, for me specifically, the emotional resonance isn't there. Mm-hmm. There's got to be some pacing to it, and so it's something just born of, I think, the music I grew up listening to, and you know, being a pop kid amidst all the hardcore and the new wave and all that stuff. Just, I don't know. I like things to, I don't know if I want them to be simple, but I like it when they give you something that you can really grab onto. And so sometimes complexity for complexity's sake, it doesn't do it for me personally.
Me either.
But yeah, I mean, you know, recording that record was a lot of fun. I mean, there was, you know, some stuff to hash out in terms of interpersonal dynamics at times, and you know, that was up to me to sort of moderate as best I could. But the other thing I remember about you guys, and this is sort of something that you deal with a lot of times, just talking about recording stuff, is two guitar bands when the styles of the guitar players can be quite different. Mm-hmm. Is, you know, getting them to like Mastodon's got the same thing where it's like Bill's more of a technician and Brent's chicken picking Southern fried lunacy, and you know, like, and sometimes they don't, you know, like you got to put them together sometimes, like they're all playing the same notes, but maybe there's a picking style difference and little things like that. And I think there was moments where, you know, in rhythm stuff specifically, where we had to kind of make sure that, you know, your slightly more technical thing, especially with the solos, like matched like the slightly groovier, some of the groovier songs on that record. You know what I mean?
Totally. Yeah. I always felt that me and JD's guitar playing was a lot like Slash and Izzy.
Sure.
Just kind of like who is who, I don't know. We're probably both at any given time, seriously. But
right.
That's, yeah, it's once you start getting down to like individual note differences and stuff like that, yeah, that's when it can kind of sort of become a headache when you've been sitting there for 8 hours editing guitars.
Well, and the thing is, if it's technical music, there's a lot, you know, I mean, it's one of those things where if you're trying to, I don't want to strip away anybody's humanity, like their style, I mean, in terms of performance, but if there's something that's meant to like lock in, it's got to lock in.
Yeah.
And, you know, some of that is either straightening somebody out who's got more swing, or swinging somebody who's trying to play it straight. And, you know, that's just part of the details that I think go into making something sound cohesive.
Yeah, as I've gone down the path of audio engineering myself, it's shocking when you really zoom in and do some surgical precision on your editing, because I know a lot more about myself now than I used to.
Oh, sure.
about when I play. Like, am I that ahead all the time? My God, you know, it's made me a better musician, but not in the way that I thought it would.
Well, you know, I mean, it's, you know, I hope that it hasn't put you down too far of a rabbit hole. Like, one of the things that I've got all kinds of concepts, but one of the things that I find happens a lot in the studio these days is you've got musicians, whether they are familiar with DAW software or not, is they, you know, you're recording something and they tend to point at the music instead of listen to the music.
Uh-huh.
You know, and it's like, well, you know, they're like, it's there. I'm like, I was like, okay, don't look at the screen.
Yeah.
Don't look at the grid if it happens to have a metronome. I was like, what is it about that you don't like? Don't tell me to zoom in and tell you what's right or wrong about it. What is it, you know, like, I find that the visual aspect of music has become a crutch, and it's certainly something that I implement when I'm doing like crazy click track drums editing to clicks and stuff. But I try to, I mean, I really want musicians to listen and feel, not stare and point.
Right.
And of course, I just hope that, you know, somewhere in there for you, there's a balance there for you being free.
It is. It's the old adage to mix with your ears, not with your eyes.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it's like, yeah, I mean, if there's a snare that's really quiet and you can look at it and you're like, oh, the snare is really quiet, it's like, okay, well, let me try and find a way to fix that snare from being really quiet. But if something's pushing or pulling, you know, I try to figure out what it is that makes it feel wrong instead of zooming in to confirm what makes it feel wrong. But, you know, that might be a pipe dream to ask modern musicians to listen, and I mean to focus more on their ears than on their eyes. But when so many people are home recording, that's just what they're going to do.
Totally. And speaking of
it's
home
a ball
recording,
buster thing, I suppose.
No, for real. But speaking of home recording, in this unprecedented time, which is now, I guess, a precedented time at this point. Well, you've been doing a lot more mixing, I guess, of people's home recorded projects and things like that. Has that basically been your main gig since the Rona hit us?
Well, yeah, and I mean, you know, I had yes, I mean, I had my studio Red Room for a long time, and I closed it at the end of 2017 and built a mixer room in my house. So, you know, I haven't stopped recording, but I've done less of it because in order to keep Red Room afloat, I was sort of maybe burning the candle at both ends a little bit, taking on stuff that caused me to get a little burnt. So, so I've done a lot of mixing. I've had one recording project that I've done, and I got a few that got pushed off that hopefully I'll do next year. But yeah, I mean, people have the resources, obviously, you being a prime example. Musicians have the resources to make good recordings at home, but sometimes mixing, there's so much trial and error in mixing that
Yeah.
Experience comes with those mistakes, and God knows I've made tons of them. So, but, if you've got small flaws in a recording, a good mix person can really amplify all the good stuff and just mitigate the bad stuff in whatever small ways are there, and do it quicker than maybe you could if you were just banging your head against the wall in maybe a less than optimal listening environment, or just you don't have a sense of what the cause of the problem. Someone may not know what the cause of the issue is.
Yeah, absolutely.
Whereas somebody who's got experience might be like, oh, well, okay, it's this. So if I fix this, this will now become more audible, and these issues might get resolved or whatever. So
yeah, my downfall was
and I
always
like
EQ.
mixing.
Yeah, it's just like knowing what frequencies produce what effects and things like that. And yeah, it's a steep learning curve, but I've found that it's better for me. It's a better learning experience if I just commit to the recording and just put it out.
Yep.
And then just move on. You know what I mean? You can sit there and try to perfect one thing forever and ever and ever, but at the end of the day, like, most people probably aren't going to understand even what you don't like about it. So
sure,
it's just
unless you decide to notify them.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Here's what I hate about this. Did you notice? Oh, you didn't? Well, now you know what I hate about it.
Right.
And now I've ruined your perspective on the song or the whatever. So yeah, I mean, it's obsessing is something I've gotten good at doing less of. But that's, I think, because I can solve stuff quicker without having to scratch my head as much.
Totally. Can you believe it's been 10 years since Warp Riders? Oh man, I can't.
Well, I mean, this whole discography thing, I mean, that I've been doing on Instagram, it's like, I'm in 2002.
Oof.
And,
oh my God.
And so it's just the whole thing is interesting, and it's obviously having work taken away from us, our touring and like all these things taken away from us, has made me appreciate everything. And then sort of going through this experience of posting pictures and thinking of some of the memories I have, it's and just realizing how long ago it actually was.
Yeah.
It's been good for me to acknowledge or to just to look at the arc, because I think for a few years I was fried and maybe not as appreciative of everything. And there's a lot of backstory as to what goes into that, but health issues within with my partner, my girlfriend, and that really made a couple years tough. And I just didn't have the perspective I do now, and Corona only amplifies it to know what I had and what I do have, and appreciate it more than maybe I was a couple years ago when I was hitting a wall.
Totally. I mean, when you're in it, when you're in the grind and just going and going and going, it's hard to keep track of how much time has passed. And and for those that don't know, Matt Bayles has been posting his entire discography on his Instagram page. You didn't even have an Instagram until you decided to do this project, right?
Yeah. Basically, I mean, my friends in He Whose Ox Is Gored started the Matt Bayles Isn't on Instagram hashtag like a few years ago when I was mixing for them, and so that's why it's on there, because I just think it's funny. Because for years I wasn't, and you actually could search it before I was posting, and you would find a mishmash of Seattle bands that I'd worked with. Yeah. With that hashtag, making fun of me for not being on Instagram.
That's funny. But
and I haven't. I don't post a lot of personal stuff. It's work. It's my work output, and it's an outlet for that. I don't need to take pictures of my whatever I cooked that day. And
totally. But it is still very personal though, because it's these little stories that people never get, and especially the kinds of bands that we all worked with and everything. There's not documentaries about every single one. There's not like super detailed Wikipedia pages. A lot, and most of it happened before social media. So even like in the early 2000s, late 90s, all that whole area is kind of a dark zone for many people that are into music from there. So it's really cool to see you kind of shine some light on that. And even when you don't have a whole lot to say about the session, even then it's like, it must have been smooth sailing because I don't remember anything.
Right.
Well, and even that is interesting to me,
There's story, and I mean, I'm sure there's, one of the problems, but one of the realities of being in my position is, as someone who's able to be in the room on Pearl Jam records or Soundgarden records or whatever, is like, not all of it is meant to be shared. you know, and
Totally.
not because sometimes it reflects poorly on me because maybe I got into it with somebody and I overreacted or somebody was, you know, like, I mean, there's always tense moments in the studio and you know, they're not all meant to be broadcast. They're not all, there's a code there, especially when you're dealing with the huge rock star bands,
Right.
that you don't talk about that stuff. So I try to find a story that applies more to recording and kind of be like, oh, well, this was an element of this that I remember that was either cool or a challenge or something. But, you know, whether Brent from Mastodon wanted to pile drive me one day because I made him play a guitar solo too many times, like that, which did happen. Well, I mean, not the pile driving, but the frustration with me did happen.
Yeah.
And it was deserved because I was kind of being a dick. I was challenging him in a way that probably wasn't as awesome as it could have been, and I owned it very quickly. And we made 2 more records after that encounter. So, you know, we worked it out, which is part of why that story isn't something that's just constantly discussed because I owned it, and we moved forward and got to make Leviathan and Blood Mountain after that.
That's incredible.
So, you know, but yeah, it's been fun. It's been fun to think back and remember, see what jumps out to me in terms of my memories on these projects.
That's incredible. Well, thanks so much for taking the time to talk to me today, and for all the people out there that want to know more about everything you've done. You've done so many records. It's absolutely incredible, and I can't wait to just see what happens when we get through all of this.
Fuck, man.
I can't. However that is.
I can't wait to just go sit somewhere outside with friends and hang out.
Yeah.
You know,
you and me.
I mean,
both.
some parts of this country are still doing that. Seattle's fairly uptight about all that stuff. So
different story up there.
Yeah,
There's
every little part of the country's handling it differently, but generally speaking, up here we're all pretty damn type A and cautious, and so there's not a lot of mayhem to be had up here.
Right.
So.
Well, thanks, Matt, and I hope you
Kyle.
take care of yourself. And
you
know, if there's anything you ever need from me, I'm just a phone call away. So,
well, same here. For some reason, you need an extra ear on a mix or something, and you want a perspective, just let me know.
Hey, you never know. All right. Well, thanks, bud. We'll talk soon. Okay.
Yep. Take care.
Bye. Thanks so much for tuning into The Highway this week. A big shout out to Reverend Guitars, Railhammer Pickups, and Earthquaker Devices. If you liked what you heard, you can follow where you can follow, subscribe where you can subscribe, and if you want to go one step further, you can support us on Patreon at The Highway with Kyle Shutt. For a few bucks a month, you can help us keep this party going, get early access to next week's episode, and even get yourself a shout out.